Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Allahumma rabbi zidni ilma. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome dear students in the subject of Internet Architecture and Protocols. It's Ghulam Yasin, lecturer in Computer Science, University of Education Lahore, at DG Khan campus. Dear students, our today's lecture topic is bridging and switching. In the previous lecture, we have also studied about bridging and switching. We have studied about bridge, we have studied about switch, we have studied about different protocols which operate on different layers. We have studied about different devices including bridge, hub and switch which operates at different layers. So this is our continued topic, and inshallah we will cover this topic of bridging and switching in this lecture and in next lecture as well. So the contents of today's lecture, including previous lecture and the next lecture, are described over here. To understand the function or functioning of layer 2 devices, what is broadcast and what is collision domain, differentiating between a bridge and a switch, to understand different bridging and switching techniques, and to examine the different types of bridges and switches. So we have discussed some topics in our previous lecture. Some topics will be covered in today's lecture, and the remaining topics will be covered in our coming lecture. LAN switching or local area network switching. Basically, whenever we create local area network, we use different connecting devices including hub and switch. But switch is most commonly used networking device to connect different computers or different devices in local area network. So LAN switches forward Ethernet frames. They just have to decide when to forward them and when not to. Because a switch is a centralized device, switch contains the addresses of all connected computers to its switching table. So this table contains the addresses of NIC or network interface card, and the switch will decide when the frames have to be forward or when the data is not being forwarded. Second point, most switch logic relates somehow to the source and destination MAC addresses inside the Ethernet frame headers of a frame sent to through the LAN. Every frame or every packet, when we talk about data link layer or when we talk about switch, we use the word frame for our data, and when this data is being transmitted by router, then we use the word packet. So over here, because we are going to use switch to forward data, so the frame will be used for data. So every switch contains the MAC addresses of its connected devices, which are basically computers, and when computer 1 or PC 1 wants to transmit data towards PC 5, then a frame will be created, and every frame contains extra information which is called header. So every header contains MAC address of sending device as well as receiving device. So every frame contains the address of source as well as destination, and switch is intelligent device, and switch will decide to forward the frame on the basis of MAC addresses. Working of a switch listens for frame that enter all its interfaces, because every switch, every router contains different interfaces, and the data is received on different interfaces, incoming ports and outgoing ports as well. After receiving a frame, about a switch decides whether to forward a frame, and if so, out which ports. So this is done by the switch, and this is done by the software which is implemented in that switch. But the main point in this slide is switch will forward the frames on the basis of MAC addresses, on the basis of NIC addresses. MAC address table. Dear students, when we create local area network, we use a switch to connect different computers, and every computer contains network interface card, which is also called LAN card. And every LAN card, every NIC has a fixed address which is called physical address, and this address is of 48 bits. This is also called MAC address. Whenever we start all the computers, and as well as switch will be started, and we powered on our lab computers, all the computers will be connected to switch, and all the MAC addresses of these computers which are connected to switch are being saved in a specific table which is called MAC address table, and this table is contained by switch, and switch contain this table for data transmission. So that's why this is called an intelligent device. So switches reduce network overhead by forwarding traffic from one segment to another only when necessary. This is called unicasting. This is a feature of switch, unicasting. So unicasting is based on MAC addresses because all the connected computers have to forward their MAC addresses to switch, and switch will forward the frames on the basis of MAC addresses. That's why unicasting is done over here. Second point, to decide whether to forward a frame, the switch uses a dynamically built table called a bridge table or MAC address table, and all the addresses of connected computers are saved over here. The switch examines the address table to decide whether it should forward a frame. There is an example to understand this concept. Let's suppose there are 20 computers in local area network, and these 20 computers are connected to a switch. If computer number 4 wants to transmit data to computer number 6, data a frame will be forwarded to switch, and switch will forward the frame of computer number 4 to computer number 6, or PC4 to PC6. So switch is a controlling authority, but how the switch will forward frame, definitely there must be some mechanism, there must be some address, there must be some identification. So the mechanism, address, identification is called MAC address, and switch contains MAC addresses of all its connected PC to MAC address table. Similarities. Both are called layer 2 devices, data link layer. These both devices are switch and bridge, because we have discussed about switch in detail in our previous slides as well as in our previous lecture, and we have also studied about bridge. So bridge is a device which is used to connect two similar local area networks. So if local area network is created and switch is used to connect different computers, different personal computers, different PCs, and this is done with the help of MAC address. Data transmission is based on MAC addresses. Likewise, if the bridge will be used to connect two similar lanes, definitely MAC addresses will be used. So second point, both filters the traffic on the basis of MAC addresses. So switch as well as hub filters the traffic on the basis of MAC addresses, on the basis of MAC addresses, data is being transmitted to intended specific destination, and this is called unicasting. Next point, each segment has its own collision domain. We have discussed in detail about collision domain. All segments are in the same broadcast domain. We have also discussed in detail about broadcast domain. So what is broadcast domain? If a system is in specific subnetwork, that will be in single broadcast domain, and we have discussed about broadcast domain in our previous lecture, taking the example of different departments: finance department, examination department, admission department, and so on. Bridges and switches. Dear students, there are different operations, there are different functions which are performed by switch as well as bridge. So these are basic 5 operations which are performed by bridge as well as switch. So these 5 operations are very important. 2 operations will be discussed in our today's lecture, and the remaining operations or remaining functions will be discussed in our coming next lecture. So these 5 operations are learning, forwarding, flooding, filtering, and aging. So we will learn about learning and forwarding operation in this lecture, and flooding, filtering, and aging will be discussed inshallah in our coming lecture. So in next 2 slides we will learn about learning and forwarding operation of bridge and switch. Bridges slash switches operations. Learning. So dear students, what is basically learning in our daily life? Learning is the process to understand something which is unknown for us. So as we learn in our daily life from university, from teacher, from book, and even then we learn from environment, from different people, from our family, and so on. So over here, learning is a process to obtaining MAC addresses, because switches and bridges works on the basis of MAC addresses. So the learning about MAC addresses are very important for unicasting, for data transmission. So now we will discuss some points which are written in this slide. Point number 1. The switch learns MAC addresses by examining the source MAC address of each frame it receives. So when a switch will receive a frame from any device, that frame contains the header as well, and source address and destination address, source MAC address and destination MAC address is written in that frame. So the switch will learn the MAC address of sending device as well as receiving device, and these addresses are saved in specific table which we have discussed, MAC address table, which are kept by switch. Second point, switches build the MAC address table by listening to incoming frames and examine the frame's source MAC address. As soon as the frame will be received by switch, switch contains the MAC address of sending device as well as receiving device, and next time whenever data is being transmitted between these two devices, sender or receiver or any other device, then the data will be transmitted, frame will be transmitted on the basis of those MAC addresses which have learned by switch. Point number next, if a frame enters the switch and the source MAC address is not in the address table, the switch creates an entry in the table. Switch will check about the MAC address of that device which has been transmitted data towards switch. When the frame is received by switch, switch will check the source MAC address. If that MAC address is in its table, in its MAC address table, it's fine. But if MAC address table missing that entry, then the switch will save that entry, that MAC address, sender MAC address to its table, so that next time when the data is received by switch from that source, then the address is always already saved. Next point, the MAC address is placed in the table along with the interface in which the frame arrived. Every switch contains different interfaces like Ethernet 0 interface or Ethernet 1 interface. So when the frame is received, MAC address will be saved as well as the interface will be saved. Interface number will be saved, Ethernet 0 or Ethernet 1 and so on. Last point, by learning, the switch can make good forwarding choice in the future, because now switch contains the MAC address of all connected PCs. Whenever next time any PC will forward frame, then the switch will forward that frame to desired destination on the basis of MAC addresses which have been saved by switch in its MAC address table. So physical addresses and MAC addresses are very important in local area network transmission, and these MAC addresses or physical addresses are being saved by switch in its MAC address table for data transmission. Dear students, this is our last slide of today's lecture, and in this slide the second important function, second important operation of switch or bridge is being discussed: forwarding decision. There are three main important points regarding forwarding, so we will learn about these three important concepts of forwarding. Number one, if the source and destination lanes are same, discard the frame. What does it mean? It means that if source device and destination device is in a same local area network segment, then the frame will be discarded. It doesn't mean that the frame will not be received by receiver. It means that because this is in a single broadcast domain and single collision domain, the data is being forwarded, but there is no concept of data or frame transmission in other network or in other segment or in other broadcast domain. Second point, if source and destination local area network are different, forward the frame. Let's suppose there are two segments or there are two sub lanes and these contains two different broadcast domains. System number one is in one broadcast domain and system number two is in another broadcast domain. You can say that system number one is in finance department and system number two is in marketing department. So now these two systems are in two different departments and source and destination are not in same local area network. So the forward frame, now the switch will forward frame to desired destination to specific next other lane or segment. Last one, which is again very important concept, if destination local area network is unknown, use flooding. We will discuss about flooding in our next lecture, but over here, if destination local area network is unknown, it means that if the MAC address or if the physical address of destination is unknown for switch, or you can say that the address of destination, MAC address of destination, physical address of destination is not being saved in MAC address table by the switch, then the switch will be unable to forward that frame to desired destination, then it will flood the frame. And what will be action on this flooding, we will study in detail in our next lecture. So dear students, thank you very much for your concentration, for your learning, for your passion. I hope best of luck for all of you always.